While I love learning about new podcast marketing strategies and tips, this is only a temporary solution, a bandage, if you will. What you truly need is a podcast marketing plan, a personalized podcast marketing plan that takes into account your lifestyle, your goals, your interests, and of course, your podcast. In this video, I'm going to share and break down how to create a podcast marketing plan that will lead to long-term growth and the success of your show. Hi there, my name is Danielle Desir Corbett, and I am the founder of Women of Color Podcasters. I am passionate about helping women of color learn how to grow and monetize their podcasts. They can quit their jobs and go full-time in their businesses. If that sounds good to you, I invite you to subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell so you always know when I upload new podcast marketing and monetization videos. I also invite you to join Women of Color Podcasters, a podcasting community with over 300 members where we chat about and geek out about podcasting. We share grants and different opportunities, as well as host a variety of live events, including co-working sessions and fireside chats with guest experts. So what is a podcast marketing plan? A podcast marketing plan is simply just a roadmap that details how you plan to grow your show and gain new listeners. This is the most important piece that I feel like podcasters miss out on. I'm going to emphasize the gain new listeners part because that is truly how you're going to grow your audience, is by gaining new listeners month after month. Your podcast marketing plan will cover who, what, when, and how. So first up, who is your ideal audience? We want to make sure we're very clear on who your podcast is for. 2, when are you going to go ahead and take action on the different items that you're going to be listing out in this podcast marketing plan? What are you actually going to do to make sure that you're growing month over month? So listing out what your plan of action is. Lastly, how are you going to measure success? What are you going to be tracking so you can know if your marketing plan and your plan of action is actually working or not? Now that we know what a podcast marketing plan is, I put together a short checklist so that you can know, okay, here's how to create my podcast marketing plan. Or if you're already an established podcaster, how to audit your plan and make sure that you are on the right track. So number 1, we really want our podcast marketing plan to have a long-term focus. We really want to make sure that the action items that we're doing, the strategies that we're implementing are going to help us to promote our show in the long run, in the long haul. Secondly, we want our podcast marketing plan to also help us to gain new listeners. Our content is going to retain our current audience. They're going to come week after week with the great content that you already share on your podcast. So our goal is to go out and find new listeners. And that's what our podcast marketing plan is going to help us to do. Anything that we're doing in terms of podcast marketing is measurable and quantifiable. That includes podcast downloads, page views to your website, and also clicks. We want to make sure that we can track our effort to see how it's actually playing out in terms of gaining more downloads or in terms of actually growing our show. So we really want to make sure we have analytics and data in place. So measuring is very, very important when it comes to your plan. Next, we want to make sure we're leveraging our strengths. We want to make sure that we're enjoying promoting our show. With that being said, we really want our podcast marketing strategies and plan to actually fit into our life. If we have a drawn out podcast marketing strategy and we really don't have any time to implement it, it's really a mute point. So we want to make sure that we're putting together a game plan that fits within our life, fits within what we're interested in, and it'll be so much easier for us to go ahead and take action. Lastly, we really want our podcast marketing plan to be simple. We want it to be simple to implement. If you have a team, we want it to be simple enough that they can go ahead and run with it and do all things that they have to do. So overall, these are the things I really want you to make sure as you're going through your strategy as you're listing out things that you're going to work on, that these all make sense. So before I go ahead and share my podcast marketing plan and the strategies that I implement for my show, I want you to let me know that you've gotten to this part of the video by simply commenting, keep it simple. All right, so I'm going to share with you my podcast marketing plan that incorporates all the things that we covered already. 3 strategies that I implement to work on gaining new listeners month to month that has a long-term focus and that truly I am able to do once, and I know that it's going to help me to grow my show for months and years to come. So the first thing that I prioritize my podcast marketing plan is SEO, or search engine optimization. So my goal for my podcast is to make sure that my content is helpful to my podcast listeners. And this is absolutely in line with the whole point of search engine optimization. So I want to be answering questions on my episodes that people are actually typing into Google search box. Why I love SEO so much as a podcaster is because it allows Google and other search engines to serve up my podcast when people are typing different search terms that I cover on my show. So this allows me not only to have me promoting my podcast, but also other search engines like Google promoting my podcast as well, 24/7, 365. One of the other strategies that I have implemented with a long-term focus is creating show notes for each of my podcast episodes. And this allows Google and other search engines to index each of my show notes on my own website, and potentially I'll be ranking for different search terms. So I may appear in page 2 of a Google search, or I may appear in page 1 of a Google search. Ideally, I'll be the number 1 spot on page 1 in Google. So what I want to stress here is definitely, if you have not already, to be creating show notes, dedicated show notes for each of your podcast episodes that lives on your website. And really try your best to include writing your show notes as part of your podcast production workflow, so it doesn't feel out of line or out of step or even more work. It is part of what it takes to publish an episode. If you're wondering what to include in your podcast show notes, I have a mini podcast show notes checklist for you, which includes 9 sections to get you started. So lastly, podcast guest appearances is one of my favorite ways to gain new listeners month after month and grow my show. I have been a guest on over 100 podcasts to date. That means that there are 100 doors from 100 different shows opening up to my show and to my brand. And as those podcasts continue to grow and gain new listeners, they'll potentially listen to that episode where I'm a guest on there, and they may be like, hey, I definitely like Danielle, her style. I love what her tips and strategies. So I want to go ahead and listen to her podcast, the Thought Card podcast. So I see each podcast guest appearance as a door from one podcast to mine. And this obviously is going to help you to grow over time. Overall, my marketing plan has 3 strategies. Number 1, search engine optimization, making sure that my content is searchable, what people are looking for. Number 2, prioritizing my show notes, my episode titles, creating a full-length blog post for each episode that will get indexed by search engines. And lastly, podcast guest appearance. So my podcast marketing plan is a good example of a plan where I am utilizing my strengths. I am looking at a long-term focus. I'm really good at writing. I'm really good at making sure that my content is on point, what people are searching for. And this means that I can actually step away from having to promote my podcast on social media all the time. Are you going to create a podcast marketing plan now? Are you going to revise your podcast marketing plan? Maybe you never had a podcast marketing plan to begin with. So I hope that you truly found this video helpful, and it will help you to strategize and get clear on how you're going to promote and grow your show. Remember, our big goal for podcast marketing is to gain new listeners. So keep that in mind for everything that you do moving forward with promotion of your show. I'll be back with another video next week, so make sure to subscribe to this channel and thumbs up to this video if you found it helpful. Bye for now.